Welcome to Dan the Road Trip Guy. I'm your host, Dan, and each week we'll embark on a new adventure, discovering memory and life lessons of our incredible guests. From everyday travelers to thrill seekers and everyone in between, this podcast is your front row seat to inspiring stories of passion, resilience, and the pursuit of happiness. So buckle up and enjoy the ride. Today's episode is a continuation of episode 78, and if you missed that one, I hope you'll go back and listen to part one of my conversation with Mr. Howard Jones. Now, to most of us who grew up in a small Kentucky town of Pine Knot, we called him Coach Jones or Mr. Jones. He was a teacher for 4 decades in the McQuarrie County school system. He was also my first basketball coach and one of my heroes. Today, we'll continue our conversation. We'll talk a little bit more about basketball, his hometown, first job, cars, and I left in from part one, Coach's advice on how to live a good life. I hope you enjoy the show. Coach, welcome back to the show. I'm excited to continue our conversation, talk a little bit more about your life.
Thank you, sir.
Of course, when you started our basketball back when we were in the 2nd, 3rd grade, you made sure we had uniforms. And I remember those uniforms. I don't remember the exact color of the first ones, but I do remember us getting some purple and white uniforms. Of course, the Pine Knot High School colors were blue and gold. And I think when we were in the 6th grade, you outfitted us with some really sharp uniforms that mimicked those uniforms with blue and gold. I just thought we'd take a few minutes and talk about basketball uniforms.
The only teams that we had, one of them was black and white.
Yeah.
And I think the other, mine should have been blue and white, but I think the supplier may have been out or made a mistake or something. So we had to get going. So I accepted those there, and the purple didn't mean anything or the black didn't mean anything.
I remember when we were, as we got a little bit older, we wore purple and white. Yeah.
You remember when you got a little bit older?
Yeah, we got a little bit older, me and Robert. I remember I have a picture of us, and we're wearing purple and white uniforms. These real shiny purple trunks, and I was always like, as I got older, I was like, I wonder why our uniforms were purple.
Okay, now Betty has a picture in our living room, a heater. It's a heatlator there, and then that you build a fireplace
Yeah.
and then there, and it has a little snapshot of Robert, and but it's that same one probably, and it's been there for years.
Yeah.
When we gave out the uniforms, everybody had a uniform, everybody took it home, and there's so much to say. You had to have that uniform before you could practice or play.
Right.
Well, and this might have been just a year or two past 2nd, 3rd grade. But anyhow, a player came and had lost his trunks. Well, tough me. I said, well, you know the rule. You have to pay for the uniform, and then I'll have to order it, and then you can't practice or play until then. It just about broke my heart with that kid as I went to school in the morning. He was out in the rain and the snow picking up the cups and things that little dipsy doodle. And he'd come to school and he'd bring me a quarter.
Wow.
And those things were about $2 and a half, I think, or something like that. But I held him to that. And I don't know how he feels about that today. But I feel like that was really a lesson for him. And that was little Roger Meadows.
Roger Dodger. Yep.
Dodger, right.
Yeah. Well, that's what builds character, I think. Maybe maybe we need a little more of that today.
Well, now, one other story I want to tell you, and I meant to get to it before this, is I didn't make a whole lot of rules, but the rules that I made, that's the rule. We had played our first game my first year at the high school coaching level in 1955 fall, and the best prospect and the best player that I had came up to my office and I had given out, all we had was one uniform, and they were gold, and they carried them in a paper bag to play on. Well, he came in the door and pitched it on my desk there, and as I looked up, I said, "Whoa, what's going on?" He said, "Coach, I just want to come by and give you this uniform." He said, "I quit," and he was a junior,
Yeah.
and a big, strong boy. Well, what did I do? Swallow my tongue, I guess. But anyhow, then he turned to leave, and I said, "Well, now wait just a minute before you leave." I said, I want to have just a little bit of a discussion with you." So I told him, I said, I'm a new coach this year. I have not made a list of rules and so forth, but one of my rules is when you quit, you're through. As long as I'm coach, you're not allowed to come back for the team or the next year's team. You're through. And he looked at me so as to say it. He said, "The boys won't throw me the ball." Well, I said, "That's not for you to decide. That's for me to decide. And we'll take care of that down the road, so as to say." But I wanted to be sure that you understood that that when you quit, you quit. And I said, "Now, I was changing shoes." I said, "When I get these shoes changed and get down on the floor, if you're not on the floor with the rest of the kids, you report to the study hall and you are through."
Yep.
When I came downstairs, he was practicing.
Changed his
Luck,
mind, right?
luck. And I meant that too.
Yep. Hey, here's one for you that I remember when we might have been in elementary school, but we were wearing the blue and gold uniforms by then. You would take us out of class in the afternoon sometimes, not often, and we would travel. We'd get in cars and we would travel to places like Capitol Hill, Tennessee, and Winfield, and places, Williamsburg. And I just always remember you not only playing the local teams, but we would go places.
I remember very well doing those things, so as to say. The root of that is we didn't have any money. Money was a problem. Now,
Sure.
when I took the job as high school coach, the principal and was Mrs. Harmon, and she was great. She was a great principal, but she was not an athletic principal. She did not understand all of athletics. She was more into music and this sort of thing.
Hmm.
But anyhow, though, she told me, she said, "You have zero account." Said, "You're responsible for that account. And if it's in the red," I said, I'll take it out of your salary. You got to make it come out of the black." Well, people was coming to the games. Where was I going to get money? Well, we survived somehow or another. And at the elementary school then, he didn't have any appropriations. So we raised our money, and you'll probably remember the boys carried Coca-Cola over to the girls selling concessions there, so as to say.
Yes.
And that was what we did. Well, some of these schools, they started asking around, "Where you get them uniforms?" They didn't have what we had. And there was those basketballs and this and that. And I just told them we raised the money. So a lot of it came is those coaches wanted us to come and play a game in front of their school,
Hmm.
and their principal would allow their kids to pay a small amount and come to the games. That was the root of the whole thing.
I see.
Now, you mentioned Winfield. I remember the two things. I remember very well you scored 24 points at Winfield. I remember that very well. And you was not a scorer. You was a defensive whiz. You usually got the best player on to guard that was halfway your size. Well, the time zone was the state line.
Right.
That afternoon, we was all set to go. We're still in class. And I got a telephone call, and it was the coach down there. And he said, "Are you coming?" He said, "My kids are in the gym." He said, "We've been warming up. I don't know how long, So as to say, you didn't show." And I said, it's not time yet. He said, it is time. And we had different time zones of an hour. See, I gathered up 6 boys. And to Winfield, we went in my car. And you all dressed your uniforms while we were going to Winfield, helping each other dress and so forth.
Yeah, in the
you
car.
Remember doing that?
Yeah.
In the car.
Yes, yeah.
So we came in and ran a few laps and dribbling the balls and said, let's play ball. And so to answer your question, was probably helping them raise some money or maybe returning to where that every now and then we'd get to play 1 or 2 games a year in front of the school.
That was fun. That was a lot of fun for us.
Well, what I tried to do at kids that young, I thought we've got to make them enjoy it. We've got to have a good time doing this, or they won't be interested in it. And so that was one of my objectives. And as far as rules, I never did do a sheet of rules and say, here are the rules for you all. I remember that I had a parent that waited till after practice for me at the front doors over there, and you all had dressed and left, and it was a lady, and she says, Coach says, I'd like to see a list of your rules. I said, what's the problem here? I said, what's going on? She said, they're waiting on my boy down here on this viaduct, and they said they're whipping up on him every day. Well, that was completely off the school grounds and everything. And I said, well, it's sort of your responsibility when he leaves the school ground here. Then I can't go home with 20 boys.
Right.
And she said, you don't have a list of rules? I said, I have one rule. Everybody acts like a gentleman. And really, with all the effort that I was putting in, that really hit me hard.
Hey, you mentioned early on growing up, your parents had a garden, and you had a garden, and your garden got bigger and bigger, I think, every year. Did you enjoy gardening, and do you still garden?
Yes, I did very, very much. And I didn't do a lot of gardening at home. One thing that I'd missed, and I guess that I'm talking, is when I was in the 5th or 6th grade, I started working for the grocery man that was in our neighborhood. And it was an operation similar to what your Uncle Earl had over there, except that he didn't have the straw and the fertilized and all that stuff. He just had the canned stuff. So I started working for him and worked for him for several years. But what helped me so much is he wasn't getting very much ahead in the groceries. He eliminated the groceries and went into hardware, and the same thing happened. And he went into used furniture and into antiques. Well, I stayed with him all those times. He was a teacher in the school system there, and his wife ran the businesses. He was really an intelligent person, and he sort of took me under his wing in an awful lot of things and advised me on this and that and so on and so forth. And I made a little money, which the other kids didn't have at that time. So as to say, I probably made, and this is only a guess, 25 or 30 cents an hour working 2 hours in the evening and working on Saturday.
Sure.
And as it came to antiques then, I sort of learned the value of antiques and what was antiques and what wasn't, and learned how to strip paint from iron varnish from furniture. And as a matter of fact, the owner and I learned that together. He didn't know either.
Yeah. So are you still gardening today?
Yes, I am.
Yeah.
But on a very small scale.
Yeah.
Now, when Betty and I retired in 1995, she said, Cotton, said let's not do all this raising food that we've been doing. And she had been pretty much preserving the food
Right.
all those years. And while I was, bringing it in the door and throwing it down, I guess so as to say. So I said to her, I said, that'll be fine. I said, I'm going to cut the garden back, but I'm going to raise the things that I like now. And that's all I'm going to do. So I ended up raising sweet pepper, cucumbers, tomatoes, and watermelons. And she loves squash, and I raised squash. Those things are that I've raised for the last few years.
Okay. One question on the garden. I think you had the first John Deere, call it lawnmower / tractor I ever saw in my life. Do you still have a John Deere today?
I still have that John Deere. And what happened on that is I had bought a snow blade, I bought a tiller, and then I bought the mower for the yard. Well, I wore it out.
Yeah, sure.
Anyway, it had cast iron parts in there where we could rebuild it. And a guy retired at John Deere, and it happened that he came up to work on another lawnmower, and he saw it, and he wanted to know what I was going to do with it. He wanted to buy it. And so I said, no, I'm going to keep it. And he said, well, let me rebuild it for you. And he had done their work down there for 25 years, industrial, something at Oneida, and he rebuilt it, and it's perfect if it's not rusted up or something.
Yeah.
It's in my garage. And I bought other John Deeres. As a matter of fact, I have one. I bought it in about 92 now.
Yeah.
That I use, and I also have another one. I mow probably an acre and 3/4 would be real close to what I mow here. I enjoy mowing.
Be sure you hang on to that, and you can leave it to your grandchildren. I'll switch gears on you just a little bit. Not only were you our basketball coach when we were growing up, but you were the physical education teacher, the athletic director at our small Kentucky school. What I remember is there was learning about different sports, basketball, softball, baseball. I remember even badminton and having a test and writing a paper on that. But then you would always make sure we did our workouts and our exercises, and then you would always have a great activity for us to play. What was your approach to teaching physical education all those years?
And I don't think the state specifies what you play, so as to say. They're interested in physical fitness and this sort of thing.
Yeah.
And in the physical education classes, this was my approach.
Yeah.
And you might laugh, I don't know. On the first day of the class, I always, in my speech, I always told them, I said, now we're going to do calisthenics, and we're going to do a few laps around the gym, and then we're going to have some fun. We're going to play a game. I said, on the calisthenics, I said, if somebody's messing up and not doing it, I'll just say, do it over. Well, when I would say do it over, the kids would take care of that.
Right.
They would let the other person know, hey, you get with it now. I had real good success with that. And we did some of them over too.
Yep, we did. Yeah, I remembered battle ball, and I was like, they probably don't play that today. It probably would seem like a dangerous game today, but boy, that was a fun game.
Well, and it's according to what kind of ball that you use.
Right.
I know that I had some younger class of girls in PE, and I used what I think was called nerve balls. They
Right.
were a little light ball, and if
Yeah.
they hit you, it didn't bother you.
Yeah.
But now the older boys throwing these inflated like an inner tube rubber balls, I could burn a blister, I guess.
Yeah, that could sting if you got hit. I never liked the trampoline. You'd pull out the trampoline. I just never was fond of jumping on the trampoline.
I never had any training in trampoline, so as to say, and I just looked at films, and I had manuals and so forth, and a lot of the kids did like it, some of them didn't. the thing about the trampoline is some of them would want to do things before they were ready to do them.
Right.
I remember Charles Woods was in on, I don't know, some type of break or something from Tennessee Tech, and he came in the door and he hadn't seen the trampoline, I don't think, before. He hadn't seen ours. I don't know if he'd ever seen one or not. And this was an after hours thing, and we had people jumping, and they were jumping and doing their seat and knees and whatever. And Charles came over and he said, "Would you let me jump?" And I questioned him, and he sort of maybe made me believe that he had a little experience on it. And I said, "Well, if you'll just get up there and jump up and down, we'll try it." Well, he got up there, and before I knew it, he turned a somersault. There was a girl that was spotting at the end of the trampoline. She saw him coming, and she went under the trampoline. And he landed on a mat there like a cat on all fours.
You mentioned Mrs. Jones, Betty. How did you all meet?
Betty was a teacher here in the county.
Okay.
When I came.
Okay. Did you play sports growing up then? Did you play basketball?
I tried to, so as to say. I was not a real good player, so as to say. But at the same time, this brings up another story. At the same time, I had speed. I was quicker and faster than most of the kids he had. And the coach that we had was interested in football. We had real good football.
Okay.
We were in the Cumberland Valley Conference, and that was from the Harlan County, Bell County, Knox County, Whitley County, those counties up and down that river. And I remember my senior year, they divided the schools into the big schools and the little schools. Most of the time, you just took your chances. You was just a member, you was part of it. Well, we went undefeated in football, and we were in the A division, and we had a playoff with the big schools that was in the B division. So we had that playoff at Pineville on Thanksgiving Day, and I never will forget. It snowed that night. It snowed through the windows of a lot of our players and windows up. It's nice. But what I wanted to tell you, though, my senior year, we beat Corbin.
Okay.
And Corbin was the big dog always over there. We beat Corbin by 2 touchdowns at Corbin. Now, our coach had a rule that if you didn't play football, you can't play basketball.
Okay.
So I was small. When I graduated, I weighed about 110 pounds. I'd have got killed out on that football field. And the coach lived about 400 or 500 yards from where I lived. I knew him, as a neighborhood man. And he was looking for a manager. The manager had graduated the year before. And I went to him and told him, I said, "If you'll let me try for basketball, I'll make you the best manager you've ever had." So I was football manager there a long time, and the football manager had it all to do too. We had 2 or 3 helpers, but I'm talking about the head man. We had to line the field if the Friday game was at home. We had to put down the lines, and they were put down by hand with lime.
Yeah, sure.
And then we had a maintained washing machine with a wringer on it, and we kept the practice stuff and the jerseys clean. We had a lot of work that we had to do. Had to stay after school a lot of times to complete that. So I competed, in practice, so as to say, and in situations he might feel sorry for me and had put me in a little bit, so as to say. But I didn't play a whole lot. But I enjoyed it just about as much as if I was the star of the team.
Yeah.
And learned quite a bit. Well, when I went to Cumberland, my brother was 2 years behind me, and they didn't figure they could send both of us to school, so I was going to go 2 years, and if you took the elementary courses, you could get a teaching certificate after 2 years. I did that at Cumberland and got that certificate. Well, he went to Cumberland and he didn't like it. He decided he was just going to get him a job at General Electric in Louisville, which he did. And so I went on to Eastern then at that time, and I had coached basketball under Paul McBrayer. Paul McBrayer was an assistant coach at UK when the war started. They took him in because he was an officer in the service. And Rupp hired Lancaster then as an assistant coach. Well, when he came back, McBrayer then Rupp wanted to keep Lancaster, so he went to Eastern and got that job. And so I had coaching of basketball under him, and he was tremendous. He tried to teach us how to coach the game instead of just blow through.
You're a great teacher, and there's a story that just popped in my mind, and I have no idea if you'll remember it. We were in high school. I think I was probably a junior. It was our last year at Pine Knot. And if you remember that gymnasium, there wasn't much space between the line and the wall. And the wall was pretty hard. And I hit my head on the wall once. And I was bleeding quite a bit. You knew my mother would probably freak out if I went home. I remember I had a white shirt on, and there's blood all over it. And you checked me out, and you determined I was okay. But you took me home. And you stood in front of me while you told my mother that I was fine, but I had cracked my head on the wall. But I think that's just who you were. You not only coached us and taught us, but you took care of us.
Well, a story I want to tell you that I do remember happened and it was in middle school after we became a middle school. We were on the softball field, and we were changing sides. 3 outs, change sides.
Right.
Well, I was standing somewhere between the home plate and first base on that line there, and they were changing sides, and we were changing sides. Well, a few of the kids had gloves, and I had 3 or 4 old gloves, and we were getting about ready to let the next batter bat. And someone in the field decided that the catcher needed a glove. Well, the batter had already taken his place at the batter's box, and he was taking his air swings, I'll call him. He's swinging that. And this catcher, and he stepped into that bat, and that bat hit him right in the top of the head.
Ooh.
And knocked him down. I mean, it put him on the ground. That guy was hitting home runs. And I ran over there real quickly. The only thing I had was my hands and my handkerchief. When I looked at his head, I saw his skull.
Oh.
It just laid the skin back.
Yeah. Huh.
And I put that handkerchief on there and held it and sent someone to call, get the principal and to call an ambulance, and everything worked out fine.
Yeah.
He was fine. They took him away, but that was fine. That stopped all the bleeding and everything. That was among the worst injuries that I had in PE.
Hey, what was your first car you ever owned?
The first car I ever owned was a 1951 Plymouth that the guy that I worked for went north on a buying trip.
Yeah.
And he said, we'll just find you a car up there in Cincinnati. And we bought it, and I kept it about a year and traded it and got a 1956 Ford and got drafted into service. And I didn't make enough money in service to make the payment, so I had to sell it.
Now, growing up, you seemed to be a Ford guy, best I remember. Is that right?
Well, most of my cars were Fords. I had an LTD.
Yes.
And I had a 67 Chevrolet that I bought from Alfred Kidd over there.
Okay.
But And not necessarily, it just happened to work out that way.
Yeah, I don't remember that one. So
I didn't keep it very long. I don't remember why, or, maybe a year or so forth.
hey, here's a question for you, and I've just enjoyed our conversation. Here's a question for you. You might have to think about this one for a minute, and I love to ask people this. If you could jump in the car with somebody, living or deceased, who do you think that'd be?
I saw that with a list of things that we might talk about or something. Really, I don't have an answer for that.
Okay.
I don't have. And hey, I was taught, and it had to be this way. When you had $1, when you spend it, you get $1's worth, so as to say.
Yeah.
I have never taken a vacation.
I was going to ask you if you'd ever been on vacation.
Earl Anderson never took a vacation.
Never took a vacation.
I just always felt that when I came back that I was so far behind and I could never catch up. With the garden and the yard and so on and so forth.
Yeah, well,
and I was a person that did my own work. My dad, he was so busy. He didn't take time enough to teach me how to do many things. In other words, what I learned by watching. Now, after I got my own house, if I had a problem and I had to call somebody, I watched them. If the problem reoccurred later, I tried to fix it, whether I did or could do it or not.
Right.
And that's the way I've always been.
Today we seem to just call somebody for everything. Hey, well, this has been fun, Coach. I could talk to you probably all night. You've been around a bit. Is there anything you would tell people on how to live a good life besides don't take a vacation? What would you tell? What would you tell some young person?
Well, not taking a vacation might be all right if you handle it mentally, and it didn't bother me mentally at all. Well, if I was talking to a younger person, I'd certainly tell them to, when you're going to school, get as much out of it as you can, get as much education as you can, so as to say,
Okay.
and be sure that you take care of your body. That would be the big things that I would say, and certainly I would want you to be a person that your children were proud of.
I know your kids are proud of you, and probably everybody that had you in school has great memories of their time with you. Well, thank you, Coach. This has been fun.
It's real fun with me, so as to say.
Okay. Well,
you have a good one.
You as well, and I'll talk to you again.
Bye-bye.
Bye now. Thank you for tuning in to Dan the Road Trip Guy. I hope you enjoyed our journey today and the stories that were shared. If you have any thoughts or questions or stories of your own, I'd love to hear from you. Feel free to reach out to me anytime. Don't forget to share this podcast with your friends and family and help us to spread the joy of road trips and great conversations. Until next time, keep driving, keep exploring, and keep having those amazing conversations. Safe travels. And remember, you can find me on the internet at dantheroadtripguy.com.